And, uh, Ladies and gentlemen, what is up? We're back. It is another episode. I know for a fact this is episode 147. I've been wrong on like the last 5 or 6 episodes with the number. This is 147 of Keeping It Real, the world famous Keeping It Real podcast. And today, Saturday morning, I have got myself a wonderful guest. Super pumped up to have my man Taylor Ammons in the house. Taylor, welcome to Keeping It Real, buddy. How's it going?
What's up, brother, man? I'm good, dude. I'm pumped to be here. It's a beautiful morning. We've got some rain supposed to come through, but it's probably the best morning that you and I could have got together to hang out and chat. Dude, I'm pumped. I'm pumped to be here. Thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. We had to reschedule from last week because I was doing a golf outing, and I appreciate that. I would have never done that if it weren't for a good cause. But we're here today, and that's the most important thing. I appreciate the time. Why don't we just kick it right off, my man? Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's going on? Where are you coming at us from live today? And we'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I'm down, man. So my name's Taylor Ammons, and Chuck, thanks again for having me on Keep It Real. I'm pumped to be here. I own a smaller residential roofing and construction, pretty much exteriors company here in Nashville, Tennessee. We specialize in asphalt roofing products, siding, gutters, windows, and exterior doors. Been in business since March of 2021, worked with two other larger roofing companies before that in the sales side of things. And I was one of those guys that was a pretty good salesman, about a $2 million producer, worked my butt off during the day, drank my butt off at night, and then had this brilliant idea that, hey, I'm doing all this work. I'm managing my own jobs for a 10% commission. I can order materials and schedule labor. And boy, have I been in for a rude awakening the last couple of years. But it's been absolutely incredible. It's been so fun to grow. It's been awesome watching my journey as an individual, my journey as a company, watching the team grow, watching the culture inside of our business grow. So it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't go back to sales for a roofing company for anything, but I'm so grateful. I love this industry. And so just excited to be here.
Hell yeah, this is going to be good because we've got the same background, my friend. So
yep.
You picked an interesting time to start a roofing company. That's like right in the middle of COVID, right?
It was smack dab in the middle. I think the most money I ever made in my life was in the middle of COVID. I worked in automotive sales. I can kind of back up a little further. So my career kind of started. My first job, I was 15 years old, and I got a job at a cart barn at Barnsley Gardens Resort in North Georgia, like beautiful golf course community. Nice. And did that. And I was one of those that I couldn't hold a job. I bounced around to a lot of different stuff. So I've done the cart barn work there. And then when I got into college, I worked in turf grass at an experiment station down in Tifton, Georgia. When I was in college, I was going to get a degree in turf grass management. And then I found out in college that the professors do not care if you actually go to class or not. So I was just like, man, we're just going to drink beer, smoke pot, and just be down here in college. And then I didn't realize that if you don't go to class, you're going to have a hard time passing those finals. So ended up getting put on academic probation in college, had to move back home, got a job, and started going to night school and was going to get my associates in mathematics with an engineering track. And then I always dreamed to transfer down to either Georgia Tech or Kennesaw State's School of Engineering. I wanted to do either electrical engineering or something in astrophysics because I love the universe. I love any celestial stuff. I think it's really neat. And now I'm in roofing. So I did yarn mill management for a couple years in my early 20s. So that was kind of what started developing my management skills. And then I went to go run a 5K. Yeah, I know. I went to go run a 5K with a guy that owned a car dealership, and we started chatting, and he said, man, I think you'd make a pretty good car salesman. So sold used Jeep Wranglers for a while. That ended up progressing into selling new Buicks and GMCs. that dealer pulled me over to a Hyundai location where I sold Hyundais for a while. I sold Subarus for a while, and then actually got recruited out of a buy here, pay here lot in Warner Robins. The funny story is I was checking into state probation in Georgia, which we can get into all those details, but I was checking into probation and there was a guy on the other side of the room and he's just hammering these phone calls out. And he was about my age, had tattoos all down his arm. And we ran into each other walking out. And he said, man, I see you sell cars, and car guys make great roofing salespeople. So I'd love to talk to you. Here's my business card. And I said, man, I'm a car guy, but I appreciate that, and just tossed it in my truck door, or my car door at the time. And then about 3 months later, I had a lull in commissions, and I said, man, let me at least go interview with this guy. Let me see what this roofing sales stuff is all about. And so he pretty much just said, hey, man, you go door to door, you find people that have damage, they file insurance claims, insurance pays for their roofs, and you get paid 10% of the contract price. And he said most of them are $15,000, $20,000. So you make $1,500, $2,000 on every deal you sign. And he was like, you can make, 5 figures a month, no problem. And I was like, that's it? And he was like, that's really it, man. And that wasn't it. I wish I had Adam Bensman's book when I first got into the industry, because I had to learn the hard way. There was really no training at either one of the companies that I was at. So I'm one of those, it really bothers me when I don't know how to do something or I'm not good at something. And so I started just really watching a lot of YouTube videos, trying different word tracks. I would listen to word tracks, riding door to door, and then we'd try stuff at the door. And then sure enough, just kind of got it, and was able to get myself to where I was about $1.5 million, $2 million producer. I worked about 35, 40 hours a week, but not a very good employee, because I was one of those that I knew I was generating revenue for the company. I was spending a lot of time drinking way more than I should. And, to the point where I started drinking in the mornings and then had a little attitude about me. And so I just decided, hey, I'm going to get my own thing going, because the company I was with, they had an incredible sales process up until the contract was signed and it got turned over to production. It was very good. But then when it hit production's office, the ball just got dropped. And in my opinion and experience, I can give somebody the most incredible customer service up front, but if I don't follow through on everything that I promised them during that sales process, they may not leave me a bad review, but they're not going to refer me. They're not going to brag on me. They're not going to take me around to their neighbors to introduce me so that I can help them out too. And so that was kind of the bottleneck that I saw that, really prompted me to get my own thing going. Was I want to be able to provide clients with a white glove experience from start to finish throughout any project that we help them with. And so we've got our white glove guarantee here at Paragon. So it's everything that's our promise to them, that everything we're going to do, we're going to uphold our core values, which we use an EPIC acronym, EPIQ, for excellence, perseverance, integrity, and quality. And so I want to make sure everything that we do, we're excellent at it, whether it be continuing education, whether it be serving the community, whether it be taking care of ourselves, our families. I want us to push for excellence. Perseverance, I want all of my guys, including myself, to never give up. Just keep pushing. Life sucks at times, but keep pushing, keep going. Integrity, just do the right thing when no one's looking. Just be a good person. And then quality, I want everything that we do to just bring so much quality and value to our clients. That way we can just create raving fans.
Dude, I love it. Isn't that the simplest formula of all time? But for some reason, people cannot seem to get that right.
Yep.
People are lacking in service. And I love what you just said there, because I think a lot of salespeople, and I'll say this, I was in the same boat, right? I had a background in distribution the first 15 years of my career.
Okay.
The first 12, I drove a truck. I roof loaded houses with a conveyor truck. And I probably have lifted and carried more bundles of shingles than most roofing crews. And I'm proud of that because I put in
Yeah.
that effort to help me understand that side of the business and to really appreciate the labor. But I get over to a different opportunity and I'm now going to be a residential roofing salesman. And the first part of it was, my training was pretty damn good too. I'm not going to complain about any of the stuff that I've found myself in, but I had a completely different perspective of the industry, and what I thought was important was absolutely not important at all, which
Mm.
was technical details. Mrs. Homeowner, we're going to cut 13 and 3/8 off of this shingle so the stagger is perfect, and nobody gave a shit. But I didn't know that at the time, right? And I struggled mightily when I first got into it. For the first maybe 3 to 4 months, I found myself really, really in bad shape. I ended up having to take a step back and kind of teach myself a little bit more of the sales aspect and really understand it. For you, for being a car sales rep, which cars are similar to roofs in that, people come to see you when they need you.
Yep.
And they don't really want to talk to you if they don't need you because,
Yep.
it's a payment, it's whatever. But I feel like if you can get in and you can sell cars to people and deal with the people that you have to deal with in that industry, that roofing translates fairly equally, right?
Yeah. I
Now,
would agree with that completely.
yeah, the only difference being, okay, when you started in roofing, your first objective is to go out and actively prospect customers, to knock doors, to try to find your people. Whereas at the dealership, you're standing around there with a bunch of guys and they're coming to you, right?
Yep.
So tell me about that transition. Was it something that got you at all? Were you like, man, I mean, I've door knocked many times in my life, and I know it sucks because number one, they're not coming to see you, they're not
Yep.
welcoming very much. Did you have a point when you first got started in this where you thought, damn, I don't think this is my thing because I'm just not getting traction or I don't feel comfortable? Or was it something where you just jumped in and were like, boom, here we go?
Man, I struggled with it at the car lot because I never wanted to be that pushy car salesman. But all of your automotive training is pretty much based around like statistical data. Like, hey, it costs us X amount of money to get this or this client to step foot on our lot. And when they step foot on our lot, they're looking for a vehicle. They want to buy a vehicle. And you need to buy or die. If they leave, the chances of them coming back or reaching back out to you to close that deal are slim to none. So you need to do everything you can right there on the front end. And it's not much different in roofing sales when you're doing door to door. I mean, you can go back and re-hit a door, but it was a tough thing to get over because thankfully at first I didn't know any difference. So I just went and did it. And I was hungry too. I was coming out of a pretty severe cocaine addiction. I had no money and was really trying to make some changes in life. I was starting to try and focus a little more in personal development. So it was more one of those, I just made myself go do it and then allowed myself to make mistakes, was not afraid to ask questions, was not afraid to learn, and really got to where I enjoyed learning. And it made the transition into door to door a little bit easier. But one thing that really helps me, and I did this the other day because I took my team out after the tornadoes came through here in Tennessee, and we were working some of the outskirt areas around the storm. And one of my guys was just kind of beating himself up because he was like, man, I'm running into a lot of Karens. Nobody's really happy that I'm there. And I was like, dude, majority are not gonna be. But with me, I have this whole story in my head. If I go up to a door, I feel like I'm a pretty likable dude. I feel like we can engage in a conversation. So if I go knock a door and somebody's nasty to me, then when I'm walking away from their door, this is literally what goes through my head. I'm like, man, I can't believe that guy just found out his wife's sleeping with his brother, man. That's just so bad because it's got to be something personal he's dealing with because I know it's not me.
Yep.
And when I had that realization, dude, if somebody's nasty to you at the door, they're just a nasty person or they're having a bad day. It's not you personally. Don't take that with you from door to door. Don't have rear view mirrors. Like, that door is over. Go on to the next one. And each door, I've got a potential to make $1,000. So let's put knuckles on doors and let's try and get some money.
Yes, sir. I love that mindset because it is super easy to get discouraged. It's super easy to blame it on every possible scenario other than I just don't have the right air about me when I show up. I don't have the right body language. It's us, and I always tell people you've got a very quick, split second to get their attention.
Yep.
If you don't, you might as well not even have a face or a name because you're just a roofer and there's probably been 50 others before you and there's going to be 50 behind you. And, the one who figures it out the best is the most successful. So I definitely don't want to hash over what we had kind of briefly mentioned twice now. You get into the roofing deal and you mentioned as you start getting success, it can be one of those deals where you can start to get a little bit of an attitude. I can appreciate it because I myself did the same thing. And you start thinking, I'm producing millions. I can mess up every now and again. I can do whatever. And, whatever it is. And you start, maybe getting a little bored. You're hanging out at the house. You start drinking beers. You start getting into some stuff, right? And then you also mentioned another addiction prior to that. So let's talk a little bit about your personal story because I think that's the most important part of the entire thing. And I think overcoming adversity and, persevering over some of the stuff that, that not just our industry, but life in general can really drag you down with. So tell me a little bit about it, man. Like how extreme did this get for you and how did you find your way out?
For sure. Yeah, that's a good question. And so since you don't know this, I'll go back to kind of the beginning. I was raised in a pretty good family. My dad was military. He was in the Air Force, was a navigator on C-130s. I was born down in Fort Walton. My dad was active duty at the time during like Desert Storm and Desert Shield. So, I was born in 89. So in those early 90s, there was a lot of war going on over in the Middle East. So my dad was spending a lot of time over there and a lot of time doing trainings. And so it was just my mom and me and my sister at the house a lot of times. And I don't ever remember like dad being gone. We weren't really that military family that moved a lot, but my parents got divorced in, I want to say around 99. So I think they'd been together about 15 years. I was like 10, 11 years old. My sister was 12 or 13. And then, so the divorce was hard, but through a lot of my recovery work, I haven't been able to draw a direct correlation back to like the divorce as to any reason that led to like my drinking and drug use. I liked the way it made me feel. So when I first got to that job that I mentioned earlier at Barnsley Gardens on the golf course, I'm 15 years old. And these guys would come in off of the golf course and I was working with guys 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And we worked for tips. And there would always be a couple beers left over in these guys' coolers in the golf cart. So we would put them on ice and then sneak over by the camera and chug them. And so my dad would pick me up and I'd just be hammered drunk, right? And would just not talk on the way home. And he would be like, "You smell like beer." And I'm like, "Well, it spills on you and stuff like that." And so, I started drinking young. And then at same age, 15 years old, I ended up getting arrested for underage drinking. We drank a bunch of beer after a high school football game, and that led to my first arrest. We were actually so drunk, we went into this little community and broke into their little like model home and just like ransacked the whole place. Ended up, somebody followed us back, called the police picked us up. And so, 15 years old, you get arrested for the first time. It kind of shook me up. I really wish my dad had just left me there because I ended up getting arrested again at 18 for underage drinking. And then when I told you I moved back home to Cartersville, up in North Georgia, when I was down in Tifton, I started smoking a lot more weed. I started doing some pills, started messing around with some cocaine. I mean, obviously it's college, so we're drinking a lot, and never really had a pot to piss in. because I never wanted to work. I just wanted to get tore up. And so when I moved back home, I started running around with some kids from high school. They're all smoking pot. They're all drinking. And I used to run around with some pretty rough people. I ran around in the hood a lot and carried a gun with me a lot of the places that I went, and ended up connecting with some guys. And one of them was trying to get back into the drug selling game. He was trying to get back selling weed, but he was talking about this kid that was preventing him because he pretty much had the whole town on lock for weed. And so I told him, I was like, hey, man, I'll go take him out for you. I'll go get his stuff, and I'll give you his weed, and you can start selling it, and I'll make sure he's out of the picture. And so we ended up facilitating, like it was supposed to just be like a snatch and grab robbery on this kid. So I called him and told him that I wanted to pick up a couple ounces of weed from him, and went to go meet him, had the gun with me, and hopped out of the car, got in his car with him, and he pulled out probably about a half a pound of weed, pulled 2 of the ounces out that he had prepackaged, put it back in the back seat. And when he put it back in the back seat, I pulled the gun out of my waistband and put it up to his head in the car, and was like, give me all your stuff. And I thought that he was just going to give it to us. And I was quite wrong. He was ready to die over his stuff. So he starts fighting with me inside of this car, and the first place my mind goes to is, oh, shoot, I'm fixing to have to shoot this guy over his weed, because I don't want, he's not going to make me look bad. And I'm in here with a gun on him. It's that situation doesn't end with an I'm sorry and you get back in your car. Like it had escalated to the point of no return. So I ended up taking the pistol off of safety and put it to his leg and had my hand on the trigger. And I'm like, I will shoot you if you don't give me your stuff. He didn't care. And so thankfully, about the time I was going to make the decision to just put one in his leg, my co-defendant came and opened up his driver's door. So he turned this way looking towards the car. And then when he turned back, I came across the top of it's kind of the back of his head really with the pistol. And my finger was still on the trigger, though. So the gun went off inside of the car, and it shot through the A-pillar in his car. And so he slumped out, and I hopped out, ran over to the driver's side, and ended up putting this kid like down on his knees and put the gun to his head again, and was like, you're done selling weed, and then smacked him with the gun again, and then told my co-defendant, hey, grab all the weed. Let's get out of here. And so we gobbled everything up. We took off back to his house, and like I was fired up. I was like, I can't believe we just did that, man. Like we got this weed, like that was crazy. But I didn't realize like what exactly we had just done. And so that night, this was like on a Wednesday night, I believe, Thursday night. It was like March 9th, whatever it was. And so we threw a big old party at his house. And that night I was going to leave and had to go by the gas station. So when we divided up all the weed, I grabbed a half an ounce, which was like 14 grams, bagged it up, put it behind my center console in my single cab truck, and stopped by the gas station. And I remember when I was sitting at the gas station, I could smell the weed in the car. And I was like, man, I should probably put this under the hood. And I was like, man, I don't have that far to go. Let's just go home. So driving home, I'm probably 5 minutes from the house, and I look in my rearview mirror and I see headlights coming like down the highway, but they're flying. And I was like, oh, shoot. And then all of a sudden, blue lights behind me. I get blue lighted. I text my friends because I had the gun with me. I had the gun like wrapped in a red bandana. And then I had the weed in the car with me. So I texted my friends and I was like, hey, I'm going to jail. And cop comes up to the window, and I told him, I said, hey, sir, I've got a pistol in the car. It's on the floor. It's got a full magazine, but nothing in the chamber. So I just kind of left my hands on the side of the car. And, he was like, where's your weed at? And he was like, dude, I can smell it. And he said, let me just give you a rundown. He said, if you have marijuana in the car with weapons, I can charge you with felony possession of that marijuana. If you're cool with me and you just tell me where the weed's at, then I'll take the gun as long as it doesn't have any, as long as it doesn't come back stolen, you'll be fine on the gun. And then I'll just take the weed. We'll do a simple possession and go to the jail. And so I said, man, there's a half ounce behind the seat. So he came over, got me out of the car, grabbed the gun, grabbed the weed, went to jail, bonded out. And then that next morning, my stepdad works for Bartow County's government in Cartersville. And he came up to me and he said, hey, you know that cop didn't pull you over because of a cracked tail light. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, they pulled you over because of something you did earlier that day. And I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And then went back over to my buddy's house for a party that weekend. And little did I know, after the situation had happened with the guy that we took his weed from, a neighbor heard the gunshot, saw the fight, called the police. So when the police go out there, he's all split up on his head, and there's weed everywhere. And so the police do an investigation, and he tells them my first and last name, my co-defendant's first and last name, and that he was coming to buy weed from us and we robbed him. And so they ended up issuing warrants for us over the weekend. We partied the whole weekend, but they ended up issuing warrants for us for armed robbery, aggravated assault, and possession of firearm during the commission of a felony. So on Sunday, we go to Hooters, because the girl I was dating at the time worked at Hooters, and we spent a lot of time up there. So we go drink some beer at Hooters, and then when we're walking to the truck to leave, it's me, the kid that I did this with, and then another friend of ours. And I'm getting in. I literally stick a Newport in my mouth and go to climb up into the truck, and then I just hear, "Get on the ground!" And I turn over, look to the right, and rushing around this building is like a uniformed officer with a flashlight and a gun on me. And then I realized the entire parking lot was just full of cars. There was like 10 people in the restaurant, so way too many cars for what should have been in that restaurant. They just light up blue and come. And within a matter of seconds, there was about 25 like tactical crew with rifles, bulletproof vests, masks, lasers. Like, I've just got red dots all over my chest. I just hit the ground. And they come up, put a gun to my head. They start asking where the drugs are, where the guns are. And we're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And so they jack me up. And there's a kid that was with us, and I really didn't trust him being interrogated and questioned by the police, because I'm like, oh, this kid's gonna fold. Me and Ethan had this whole story, and so they end up letting him go, but take me and Ethan in and begin questioning us. I was up front in central booking for probably 3.5 days, because they took me through the interrogation process and I just lied through my teeth. But they backed me into a good corner. I ended up counseling up. And then when I'm waiting back in holding, people are asking me what I'm in there for. And I tell them my charges, and they're like, hey, man, you're going to chain gang. That was like the slang saying in there for you're going to prison. Like, you're going to chain gang. And I was like, nah, man, because I'd been arrested multiple times before that, and I got a bond and all this stuff. And so I ended up getting populated in the back, and that was the first time I'd been populated in jail. And they took me back to the maximum security section, and that's when I found out what gangsters really are. Because I got populated overnight, the doors popped at breakfast, and, it was like something out of a movie. These guys just come out of the cells, they're jacked, and so they asked me what I was in there for. Everybody's saying the same thing. You're going chain gang. You're going chain gang. And there was a few that actually asked why I was even in the dorm that I was in, because the fact that I had the armed robbery, I was supposed to be in this double I block, which was for violent offenders. Like the other guys, they could have been gun charges or felonies or felony drug possession. But, double I was more for murderers, armed robbers. They had a special pod for like your rapists and things like that. But Yeah, it was a rude awakening. And then I think it was a week or two later, went to a bond hearing, and they go through, there's like 70 of us going to bond hearing. And then they're reading the list and they're like, oh, it looks like everybody's going to be getting a bond today. And then they're like, oh, everybody but one. And then I'm like, what's the chance, right?
Yeah.
And so sure enough, they call my name in there. I stand up. Taylor Ammons, bond denied. Boom. And I was just like, oh, Lord. So they take me back. They ended up setting my bond after, I don't remember if we'd been indicted yet, but they ended up setting my bond at $100,000. And I was like, oh, no problem. Like, my dad's property is worth $250 or something. I'll be out in no time. Well, when you do a property bond, they take the tax assessor's value, and then they take 40% of that, and that has to equal your bond. Well, we ended up having about $63,000 to play with for property bonds. So I had to sit, and after 62 days or something like that, or 60 days, I got a bond reduction, bonded out, went home. And in 2012, we ended up sentenced on that. But I went and met with a paid attorney, and he was like, hey, man, look, I'll charge you 10 grand. I'll take this thing as far as you want to go. But, man, I can't keep you out of prison with what you've got going on. And I said, well, with all due respect, sir, if somebody gets $10,000 from us, I don't want to see a courtroom again. And he was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a thing, man. So I said, I can pay the public defender $50 because I qualify, and he can't keep me out of prison either. So I'm just going to go that route. So got linked up with a public defender, and the whole time I was incarcerated that first time, my co-defendant was in the block next to me, and there was a door with a gap about 3/4, maybe an inch under the door. So he was saying like his family wasn't putting any money on his books. They weren't helping him out. They weren't sending him any supplies. And so I was ordering stuff that my family was putting commissary on my books for, and like sliding it under to him like, hey, man, just keep your head up, stick to the story. And then we're like writing notes back and forth, you know, pretty much saying like, hey, man, make sure you stick to the story. We'll get out of this. Don't worry about it. Well, he was taking those letters and getting them photocopied by the jailers and sent to his attorney. And I don't even know how he was doing that, because our dorm, that would have been like caught immediately. Anybody that's seen like 60 days in, people start doing weird stuff, they're immediately assumed as the police. And so we went to go meet with my public defender one day after I'd gotten out, and it was me and my mom. And he had all those letters in his hand, and he said, Taylor, your co-defendant's attorney sent me over a stack of letters you were writing him in jail. And he said, I'm going to be real honest. When you read these, it makes you look like you did it, and you're trying to silence the only witness on the case. And I was like, that sucks. And he said, if these get into the hands of the DA, you'll probably get 30 years. And so I'm just like, oh, Lord. So he said, let me see what I can do. I still want to talk to him. So we leave. My mom's like, you want to go get something to eat? I'm like, well, I guess. I don't really know what we do now, like potentially looking at 30 years in prison, because the armed robbery itself in Georgia is one of their like 7 deadly sins, as they call them. And it carries a mandatory minimum of 10 years. So if you get convicted of armed robbery, like you're at least going for 10. And the aggravated assault carries another 10, and then the possession of firearm during a felony can carry another 10. The armed robbery can actually max out at a life sentence of, I think, 30 years. And so collectively, it could have been a total of, 50 plus years if they wanted to really baptize me. And probably 6 months later, we go back, maybe 3 months, we go back to my attorney, and he's like, hey, man, I talked with the DA. They're willing to make a deal. If you'll plea out on the aggravated assault and the gun charge, they'll waive the armed robbery. And if you agree to do some adult boot camp time. And I was like, how long are you thinking? And he was like, maybe 6 months. And I was like, when can we go to court?
Right.
And he said, yeah, I said, when can we go? And he was like, He said it was like either the next Tuesday or the following. And I was like, let's go the next Tuesday. What I didn't realize is that I'd signed non-jury. So I didn't actually sign a plea. Like a lot of people talk about how they signed a plea and then they go in and that's already accepted. Like I didn't do that. It was just the DA was going to be making a recommendation to the judge, but the judge could have ruled whichever way he wanted to. So the judge could have told the DA, no, I'm giving him 30 years, and I would have gotten 30 years. But DA recommended like, hey, we put the armed robbery on hold. We do aggravated assault and possession of firearm. We do adult detention center time, and then, and some probation. So the judge ended up accepting that, gave me a 60 to 90 sentence in the Paulding County Probation Detention Center, which was kind of like a little halfway spot to a prison. It was ran by the Department of Corrections, but it was very like militarized boot camp. Like I had an outside work detail. We marched everywhere. We had to no guard our head every other week. We had to keep our beard shaved down. So it was very, very disciplined. And, I spent Thanksgiving of like 2012 inside of there. So, spent some time away from family. And in total, I've spent a little over a year of my life behind bars. So I know not near as much as what some people that I know have dealt with, but still a long time to be away from home. And, when I got home from there, I still really didn't learn my lesson because my family was still constantly bailing me out of things. And so I had 10 years of probation. And then I was on first offender in the state of Georgia, which the first offender is if you successfully complete the terms of your probation, they'll wipe your slate clean. Your arrest will still be there, but you won't have a felony conviction. And I was probably arrested 6 times maybe while I was on that state probation. I was arrested at that same Hooters, had gotten into a fight. And then in 2018, I was at a bar with a friend of mine, and we were doing a bunch of blow at the time. We were drinking a lot at the time, and we'd had a party like a week before. And he told me that he had hooked up with these 2 girls that we knew. And I was like, oh man, that's cool. And we're at the bar, and I run into these 2 girls, and I'm good friends with them. So I was like, hey, how was last week? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, y'all know what I'm talking about. Like, how was it? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And I said, the threesome. And they're like, we didn't have no damn threesome. And so I literally turned to my buddy and I was like, bro, why are you always lying? And it was in like a whole group of people. He lost his mind, and I didn't realize how much I'd like overstepped calling him out like that, because I think I embarrassed him. So he ended up leaving. I get a cab to his house because at the time I'm living with him. And I get a cab to his house, and I'm like, hey, I'm on the way to talk to you. And he's like, don't come here. I'll call the police. And I said, well, go ahead and call them because I'm on the way and we're going to talk. So we pull up over there. He's got all my stuff from my room out on his front patio. And so I knock on the door, no answer. Knock on the door, no answer. So I said, you know what? I'll replace his door. So I take a step back, one swift kick below the doorknob, door blew open. Boom. And I was like, Israel. And when I yelled his name, he bum rushed around the refrigerator, and it was a pipe or a mag light or nightstick, something about this big. And he caught me across the front of my head. And then as I was falling down, he cracks me across the back of my head and splits the whole back of my head open. And I thought I was going to die in this guy's house because he hit me a few good times. And on GoldenEye back in the day when you got shot, the blood would like run down the screen. That was like what I could see when I was laying down, was like blood running out. And I was just like, oh man, if he hits me again, I'm done. And so he ended up letting me up. I go outside, there's blue lights in the driveway. And I tell the cop, he's like, what's going on here? And I said, I just need an ambulance, man. I'm bleeding. And he's like, no, I need you to tell me what's going on. And I was like, am I under arrest? And he said, no. And I was like, well, then I just need an ambulance. So he calls an ambulance, and he had split the back of my head open down to the skull. So they ended up taking me to the hospital to try and make sure I didn't have any skull fractures. And Sure enough, I didn't. They didn't arrest either one of us. I couldn't believe it, because that would have 100% sent me back to prison. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do after that happened, because I had a history with a lot of rough people. They started reaching out. How do you want to handle this? What do you want to do? And I was really scared that I was going to do something really stupid, because I was really angry. So my dad ended up calling me and begged me to move down to Warner Robins, where he was at the time. And so decided to up and move down there, and got a job waiting tables at a seafood restaurant. And I was going to get a job at another car dealership, but I said, well, let me go wait tables and make some extra cash until I figure out what I want to do and get my head back right. And that ended up turning into a management position. And then from there, I got into the automotive industry again at the Subaru dealership. And while I was at Subaru, I made some good friends, but there was a guy that I worked with there that had asked me if I could get any pills. And at this time, I was drinking, but I wasn't doing any drugs. I was pretty good. I was trying to save some money. I was in a relationship, so I was trying to do the right thing. And so I hit up this guy that used to work at the seafood restaurant, and I'm like, hey, man, I got a guy looking for some pills. Do you know any, or do you know of anybody that's got some? And he was like, nah, I've just got green and white. And so the guy was like, hey, man, I'll get some of that white. And so I started bringing him to meet this guy to go get some blow. And one day when we were leaving, he's like, you know, do you want to hit some? And I was like, nah, man, it gets me pretty bad. I'm good. And then he kept asking me. Finally, I was just like, you know what? Yeah, let me hit a little bump. And it was all downhill from there. I ended up losing my stepbrother in like January of 2018 or 2019. And I just spiraled from there. I got thrown out of the girl's house that I was dating, and I went to my drug dealer's house and stayed there for 3 days. I had about like 12 or 15 grand in the bank, I think, maybe 20 from selling cars. And within 8 weeks, I had drained every bit of that. I stayed up 3-4 days there at his house, just snorting blow, and then just was on a super downhill spiral, between hotels, prostitutes, strip clubs, drugs, like anything I could spend my money on, I did. And then I looked up one day and I was sleeping in my car outside of a hotel about a mile from my dad's house. And I was like, I got to figure something out. I've got $800 to my name. And so ended up getting a job at a cookout as an assistant general manager. And I really decided, like, I want to turn my life around. But I just couldn't kick that cocaine addiction. And January 21st of 2020, I remember waking up from like just this like stupor from cocaine. And I keep hearing this light switch. And my buddy's like, man, did you not pay your power bill? And that was when I had hit my rock bottom. At least it felt like it at the time. And so I had to go to my dad's house, pretty much admit, like, I've got nothing. I'm behind on everything. And so he ended up putting me into treatment for cocaine. And during that time, I met my now wife. And she kept trying to get me to move to Nashville, because she's like, hey, we don't even have to date. Like, just move up here. I want to see you, like, not kill yourself. And moved up here, started getting clean again, but the alcohol started becoming more and more and more. And then I got to the point where it was after I'd went out on my own. And I don't know if it was the stress of business ownership or the fact that I hadn't addressed any problems that I had. But when I would come home from work, I'd buy a 12-pack of seltzer beers, the flavored seltzer beers, and a liter of Tito's. And I would drink my wife would have a couple, but I would drink every bit of the Tito's bottle, but a little swig. And then most of the 12-pack, if not all of it. And then the next morning when I would wake up, I would shake so bad and be so sick that I would throw up for the first couple hours, or until I could swig enough vodka to get it to go away. And so then that got to the point where I had to swig vodka to get the day going. And then that got me until a local restaurant opened. I'd go drink anywhere from 2 to 6 double Tito's with cranberries over lunch. And then I'd go out and run sales appointments the rest of the day. And then at RoofCon 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, RoofCon 2 years ago, because I'm almost 2 years sober now. I woke up. It was the day they were doing the meet and greet with like Ed Milet, I think it was, or John Maxwell, one of the two. Yep. I'm throwing up. My business partner's like, "Hey, man, are you good?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is normal. It lasts for a couple hours, and then I'll meet you over there." Well, this time it never got better. It started getting worse. So I was throwing up. I was shaking. I was sweating, and then I was cold and then hot. So I was just laying in this hotel room with cold towels on me. I'm just in my boxers and like in convulsions. I could only take little capful sips of Gatorade and then throw that up. And then it was in the bathtub because I was shaking so bad. I went and laid in the bathtub at the Rosin Center down there in Orlando and just had cool water running on me because I was so hot. And then when I'd get cold, I'd kick it to hot water. And that was when I was like, I have to make a change because there's really something wrong here. This isn't like I just drank a little too much. So make it back to Nashville, get some blood work done just to see what's going on. And about 2 days later, blood work comes back. The lady asks if I can come in. I go in and she's like, I've never seen liver and kidney enzyme levels this high. I want you to take this and go to Vanderbilt's urgent care and give them this blood work. And so I did that. They pulled blood work, ran it again. They came to me and said, now this is like by this time, 3 or 4, maybe 5 days since I was in that tub. And they're like, you need to go to Vanderbilt's ER downtown. And so I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, you need to go. And I was like, well, can I at least go home and put on sweatpants? And they're like, I'd rather you not, but if you need to, yes. So I went, checked myself into the hospital. And the longer I stayed away from alcohol, my levels were slowly coming back to normal. But they were like, 100% the alcohol is shutting down your liver and your kidneys. If you don't stop what you're doing, this will kill you, and it will kill you soon. So a lot of people say they wouldn't be here today had they not gotten sober, but I'm really not convinced that I would have been because it was so bad. I could tell I was swollen. I was really bloated. And so I made the decision then to get sober, and I made it 97 days because I was trying to get what I've coined secret sober. Like I wanted to get sober, but I didn't want to admit I was an alcoholic. I didn't want to admit that I was a drug addict. I didn't want to admit that I had a problem because this was like 2021. This is not that long ago. And so I ended up relapsing at 97 days while I was on the road doing some flooring work for Amazon during the winter when we were slow. And almost lost my fiance over it because I was doing some inappropriate stuff when I was on the road. I was, texting with other women and stuff, like just really not being a good person. And so by the grace of God, I was like, man, if I don't get sober, I'm going to lose everything. And so when I went home, I got serious about it and I got sober, and I haven't had a drink since. And so that has been almost January 23rd will be 2 years. And my life has began to transform since then. Business is going well. We're scaling. We're at like 6 employees now, just brought a sales manager on. We're going to finish just under 2 million this year, but with the structure we have in place, we're going to make a push for 6 million in 2024. And then we want to build out a franchise model here in Tennessee of some locations that are staffed somewhere around 17 to 19 employees, generating $8 to $10 million, and then have those kind of spread across Middle Tennessee. Build a corporate a corporate headquarters that can oversee those 3 locations, and then get ready to present that to private equity for a potential sale. And then I've told my key guys, like, hey, when this does happen, because, you know, I'm trying to get around your revolts. I'm in another group called The Program. Like, I'm trying to get around the right people to where, you know, be on these podcasts, be able to pour into other people so that not only are we able to create an amazing company with an amazing culture, but also something that can transform lives financially as well for those that work with me. And I've told them, guys, worst case scenario, if we build out this beautiful model, or it even adapts or adjusts, we can start gobbling up smaller companies as we scale, and we can build something really nice here, and we can change a lot of lives. We can impact a lot of people, and we can make a lot of money while we're doing it. So I know that was definitely the extended version of that. I'm excited to hear some feedback, but, you know, it's really surreal, though, to look back on, you know, I beat myself up. I'm sure you do too, that you haven't made certain decisions that have gotten you further in life. But when I really, especially when I talk to guys like you about this, and I'm talking about dates like 2020, 2021, COVID, and how fresh all that addiction stuff really still is, I've made it a long ways. And it's only just the beginning, but it's so cool every once in a while to lift your head up and smell the roses and be like, dude, you're doing it, but you're also this close to being the same guy. So we've got to make sure we're making the right decisions every single day to avoid that old Taylor, because he's still there. We've got to kill that old Taylor every single day.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, that right there was the best story in the history of Keeping It Rio, as far as just being interesting. And I did not expect that. I'm not going to lie.
That's
I'm
why
glad that I didn't do my research beforehand, because I did not expect what you just told me there for your story. That is amazing. Number one, congratulations, because
thank you,
dude, it's hard. It is very, very hard. I remember when back in 2018 as well, I got into a little bit of a funk myself, and I started drinking some beers, and it was like I'd have a 12-pack a night. I'd be sitting on my patio or whatever, just drinking beers, whatever. And it became a huge habit to where, like, the dudes at the store knew me. If I wasn't buying a tall can, like, what's wrong, bro? Like,
yeah.
So I understand. And you get through that. You've given yourself a bigger purpose with your business, with your family. You've been super blessed that people didn't give up on you along the way, because a lot of people don't have that support. And I think that's crucial as well for your recovery, for your growth as you move forward. But the mindset, man, you know, like I was at RoofCon 2 years ago. I met Ed Milet and John Maxwell. I remember that very vividly. I sat at the table with Ben Machaca, and we were like, dude, it's John Maxwell.
Right.
And that wasn't long ago. So I respect that journey. And to get to where you are now, a company that's established, like you say, you've got some people that you're bringing into your team, you're starting to build it. Your vision is badass, because I think that that's the direction our industry is going in.
Yep.
I literally just bought this company back, Rio Blanco, from my former partners. We had shelved it for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm starting it with a different mindset, a different model. And it's like, okay, I've got an escape plan. I know what I want to do with it, and I know what the purpose is of it. And it's not going to be, I don't want to go chase insurance claims. I don't want to have to deal with all that stuff on a regular basis. My main goals for my company are, I want to have less stress in my life. I want to be able to do my podcast whenever I feel like it. And I want the roofing company to help me and a few people to have a nice, stress-free, successful life. And I think that's critical. And what I really, really respect about what you just said at the very end is that you understand the old Taylor is right there, bro. Like, this is not 10 years, 15 years. 2 years is remarkable, and I certainly applaud you for that, because I know that's impossible to some people to ever even get to that level. And, you know, that's just the start for you. You've got a vision. You're going to continue to move forward. You've got people around that can keep you in check. I love the game plan with the business, and I love what you're looking to do. So I always like to try and go a little bit further in depth, but we're almost at the hour on this episode. So we're definitely going to do another episode at some point down the road.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk more about your roofing business, but life is more important, I think, than business. And I really appreciate what we've covered here. Let me ask you this, Taylor, if anybody is watching this that you have just impacted, that's maybe living that life where they're, like you say, ashamed to admit that they've got a problem, maybe they see this and say, oh my, that dude right there is inspiring because I'm in that position where he was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I want to reach out to this guy because I see what he's doing and I want to connect. I want someone that I can help me hold accountable. How do people stay in touch with you? How do they follow your journey? What's the best way if someone just wants to touch base and say, man, you have super positively impacted my life? What's the best way that they can do that for you?
Yeah, for sure. I encourage that, and I hope people will do that. So I'm on Facebook, Taylor Ammons, and then the app might be like the Residential Roofer or something. I'm the Residential Roofer on Instagram, but that's really, when I first got sober, it was for me, and then the hardest part was just actually being honest with myself and accepting that I was powerless over alcohol and powerless over drugs. And that when I tried to have the steering wheel, I was going to lead us into the ditch, a lake. It was not going to be good. But when I let go and just surrendered to God, that I was like, man, I can't do this. You have to take this. Things started to change, and I started to change because I had a mindset switch, like you're saying. I started getting in these mastermind groups, paying this money for personal development, and I'm not one of those to say that I'm this self-made because, like you said, and I'm glad you did. Those people that didn't give up on me and gave me second chances. I'm not self-made anything. I'm self-destructed maybe, but
Right.
It took those that were around me that never gave up on me, because so many people will get in addiction and their families will, their friends will. So, some people may be in that situation, but I'm always here. And the reason I stay sober today is that I want people to see what I've been through. I want to stand behind what I've been through. If it loses me customers, I don't care. You're not my client anyways. But I want people to know who I am and know that the reason I stay sober today is to give you hope that everything can be okay. It's that simple. I want people to see, like, you don't have to be ashamed of where you come from. You don't have to be ashamed of the decisions you've made. You don't need to make those decisions again, but don't be ashamed of where you came from, and make the decision, get real with yourself, and create an amazing life for yourself. But I love people to reach out to me to talk and just be like, how did you do something? And I'll talk you through it. I don't have all the answers, but I promise you, between me and you, we can find the answer, or I'll tell you what I did and how it didn't work, and you can do the opposite.
There you go. Being there to help others. That's what this world's all about. Taylor,
That's it, man.
I can't thank you enough, my friend. This has been really an amazing hour. I definitely throw the invitation out. I'd love to do another episode sometime in the near future where we can continue on with it.
Yep.
And for everybody that watches this, I thank you guys very much. I give a shout out to my sponsor, Roofer. I don't know if you use Roofer at Paragon or not, but Roofer is the best software program in the world. They've got the best coffee mugs as well. I do feel a little bit guilty because this is actually, in Hollywood terms, this coffee mug, it's actually just a prop. Like, it looks like there's probably hot coffee in it, but it's just there so I can show the Roofer logo. I appreciate those guys, and I appreciate everyone for watching. Until the next time, we will see you on Keeping It Real, and thank you guys for all your support.